Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, today we're going to take a look at the Tyrant card, who's coming to the game this Sunday via 2-week hero release event. In this video I'll walk you through his active and passive abilities, as well as taking a slightly deeper look into the mechanics behind how the passive works in the context of the damage ladder. I'll finish with my customary infographic with my own thoughts and recommendations for character use. I always start these character overviews off with a nod to the art department. I think the Tyrant card is no exception, with a fantastic character model, animations and 3D render. I think the exoskeleton looks super cool. In terms of traits, we see the Tyrant guard has two. Big Target is already known in the game and lets adjacent units to the Tyrant guard benefit from its large size and take fewer hits. Crushing Strike is new and allows the Tyrant guard to do bonus damage if it's remained stationary. The stats you see on screen are shown scaled to Diamond 2, and the Tyrant guard has a movement of 3. It also has a melee attack with piercing damage. We see a new Tyranid sword, as well as a health and armor weapon that can be equipped twice for the Tyrant guard. Next we can look at the Tyrant guard's active ability, Crushing Claws. This does piercing damage to a primary target and also applies the taunt debuff to it. Enemies adjacent to both the Tyrant guard and the primary target have the suppressed effect applied for 1 round. The other thing to note about this ability is that it also does physical damage. This means that in theory, the Tyrant guard should also be usable in any physical traits for legendary release events. The passive ability is called Guardian Organism, and this lets the Tyrant guard essentially gain a damage reduction if it hasn't moved or remains within synapse range. This bonus is also applied to targets adjacent to the Tyrant guard that benefit from its Big Target trait. In this video clip, we can see the Tyrant guard facing off against the forces of the Tau Empire. When the Tyrant guard applies Crushing Claws to Revas, we can see the taunt effect applied to the primary target, as well as the suppressed effect to adjacent enemies. Interestingly, here we can see that Shozil suffers from the suppressed effect, and Revas has the taunted effect applied as it was the primary target. Darkstrider, despite being adjacent to both of those characters, does not suffer from any effects. I'll show you a couple of more clips of this active ability in action so we can figure out exactly who is affected and which hexes need to be relevant. In this second clip, we see the Tyrant guard again facing off against the same Tau units. We've changed the positioning slightly and again use Crushing Claws. Here we can again see that Revas is affected as well as Darkstrider, but Shozil is spared. In this final clip, we again see how Crushing Claws works and demonstrate that the affected 2 hexes are currently where Shozil and Darkstrider are placed. Here Revas is affected by the taunt, and the 2 highlighted hexes are the hexes involved in the Crushing Claws ability. Next we can take a look at the Tyrant guard's passive ability in action, where he faces off against the lethal Tau, Darkstrider. As you can see in this clip, at the moment the Tyrant guard doesn't have any buffs, and Darkstrider, if it attacks, does roughly 1500 damage. However, if we pass the turn back to the Tyrant guard, we can see that because it didn't move, it benefits from Crushing Strike. In theory, at the end of its turn, if it hasn't moved, it should activate its Guardian Organism. Lo and behold, at the end of the turn, the Tyrant guard knuckles down into a defensive position and then benefits from Guardian Organism. Now when Darkstrider wants to attack, the damage shown is only 860, a big reduction to previous. In this second clip, we can see the interaction between the Tyrant guard and characters that provide synapse. When the Neothrope moves within 2 hexes, you see a bit of a visual animation over the Tyrant guard, telling you it's in synapse range. Unfortunately, there's no direct icon or buff for the character, so you have to pay attention to that visual cue. However, as a result, we can see that the Tyrant guard now benefits from Guardian Organism because it's within synapse range of the Neothrope. This final clip demonstrates Guardian Organism and how it interacts with adjacent allies. This is a weird world where there's some Darkstrider on Darkstrider action, but again, I'm just here to demonstrate how Guardian Organism interacts with Big Target. At the moment, the enemy Darkstrider does full damage to our team. However, when we pass the turn and let our Tyrant guard hunker down, we can see that the enemy Darkstrider does not only severely reduce damage to the Tyrant guard, but also to our friendly Darkstrider unit. That is because the Darkstrider is benefiting from the Big Target, and by extension, the Tyrant guard's Guardian Organism. The Tyrant Guard's passive is interesting because it applies a percentage damage reduction. We don't have many percentage-based skills in the game, and the recent introduction of them have forced us to have a re-understanding of how damage is calculated and where these percentage skills fit in. The cap damage reduction that the Tyrant Guard applies comes in at the end of the damage calculation shown on screen. You'll be familiar with this concept if you've watched my other videos, but essentially you add up all of the characters' damage, their buffs, then add a capped damage benefit, and then check for the Tyrant Guard's damage reduction. At level 50, this is capped at 33% or almost 2000 damage per hit. On this infographic, you can see everything summarized for the new character. I'll post these on the Pants of Horus Discord as well as the Tacticus wiki, both linked in the video description. We can take a look at the character stats to start with, courtesy of my friend Tawan and his spreadsheet. The Tyrant Guard has the highest health in the entire game at the moment, scoring in the 100th centile. It also has an impressive armor stat at the 73rd centile. Damage isn't too shabby, especially when you factor in the Crushing Strike trait, which gives you a 50% damage bonus if it hasn't moved this turn. In terms of abilities to level, I think that the value from the active ability doesn't necessarily scale with levels. You're interested primarily in applying the taunt and suppression effects to the enemy units. The passive ability is where the Tyrant Guard shines and makes itself a really cool and useful PvP character. We'll need to wait for the rest of the Tyranids, but on the surface of it, having a 50% damage multiplier is incredibly powerful and potentially could allow the Tyrant Guard to stand alone in team compositions. Remember that these sorts of damage modifiers are multiplicative, and therefore 50% stacks with 50% when you factor in things like elevation or barbed wire. If you want a deeper explanation of all this, I suggest you check out my damage buffs video where I take a deep dive into damage and how it's all calculated. That's all I've got for now. I hope you've enjoyed that video and found this information useful. Please consider entering my referral code on screen. It gets you 100 Blackstone and goes a long way in supporting me in the work that I do. It's single use though, so choose who you support wisely. Also, if you're able to and you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing to my channel. When I get to 5,000 subs, I'll be able to provide a game code to everyone in Tacticus for some freebies. Thanks, bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!